Before we begin, in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining children under the age of 13, violating the Child's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies meant to dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. This video is not made for kids. It is not targeted at kids. It is not advertising to kids. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. The Locum Doctors Trilogy continues with Last of the Cybermen, released in May of 2015, written by Alan Barnes, directed by Ken Bentley. Last of the Cybermen stars Colin Baker as the Sixth Doctor, Fraser Hines as Jamie McCrimmon, and Wendy Padbury as Zoe Harriet. Also featured in the cast is Nicholas Briggs as the Cybermen. As always, I do these unscripted, so there is a blanket spoiler warning in place just in case I do discuss spoilers. This is your only warning. And right off the bat, it's interesting to note this is Colin Baker's second story with Fraser Hines and Wendy Padbury. Earlier, he did Legend of the Cybermen, which was part of the Jamie trilogy. And what's really interesting to note here is that despite having worked together, the performers are able to create an entirely new relationship for the Sixth Doctor, Jamie and Zoe. And, you know, it's not like, oh, hey, this feels familiar or this feels recycled from Legend of the Cybermen. It's interesting to note, too, that both times the Sixth Doctor has worked with Jamie and Zoe have been Cybermen stories. Anyway, after the Sixth and Second Doctors switch places, the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe find an abandoned... It's a giant Cyberman head carved into the side of a mountain. This is some sort of fortress or something. And real quick on the performances, Colin Baker, as always, is great. You know, I'll try to talk about it a little bit more as we go through the story, but just, yeah, right off the bat, he's great. Fraser Hines is good too, but this is not one of Jamie's best stories. You know, because this story gives him so little to do. You know, because initially he is so mistrustful that this is the Doctor, which is very in character for Jamie, but all of it is just... It's very stagnant, you know, because he remains mistrustful for so long of the story, even after the Doctor has very clearly proven he is still the Doctor. And then in episode 4, Jamie is stuck with the B plot where nothing really happens while the Doctor and Zoe continue on an A plot. Zoe is great, and she is my favorite part of this story, especially towards the end, which we'll talk about. Anyway, as I said, the team finds a giant Cyberman head carved into the side of a mountain, where they meet a lone Cyberman named Lanky. Not because he's tall, but because he's from Lancashire. And Nicholas Briggs is great as well, because... You know, he always does the Daleks and the Cybermen and the Jadoons, and he usually does most of the creatures. And in regard to the Daleks and the Cybermen, it always feels like Nicholas Briggs has way more fun doing these unique variants, you know, like the Time Controller and Lanky here, because Lanky was saved by his friend, another character in this story named Captain Frank, when he was being partially converted. Partially converted lone Cyberman. Isn't that a coincidence? And for those of you joining us late after Series 12, that joke will no longer be topical. But yeah, Lanky is great, you know. And there's really not much more to say about that. He's just a really fun character. And the Doctor finds that Lanky and Captain Frank have been hired by the curator of this museum, a woman named Xenox. You know, she wants memorabilia, to display memorabilia from the Cyber Wars. Speaking of, in the Cyberman timeline, this story takes place between the Patrick Troughton story, The Invasion, and the Tom Baker story, Revenge of the Cybermen. And this story is sort of, in Revenge of the Cybermen, it's sort of established that after the Cybermen Wars and the invention of the glitter gun, a gun that shoots gold dust into the air, which clogs the Cybermen's respiratory systems. The Cybermen were decimated in the Cyber War. And this story explains why there is so few of them left by the time of Revenge of the Cybermen. And if I was to have... My really big problem with this story is episode 2. Like, as I... Shoot, I was going all over the place. That curator of the museum, Xenix, she has an assistant with her, a young boy named Findle, who I'll get into. And Findle is really interesting here. No, I just lost my train of thought. Findle is actually really interesting because he has a really strong relationship with Zoe in this story. The characters have really great chemistry, and we learn a lot about Zoe's history and what happened to her life after she started traveling with the Doctor. Zoe went to a school called the Parapsychology Unit, and this story also actually interestingly weaves some threads with Tomb of the Cybermen, and I'll get to that in a minute. And Zoe learns that after she left, after she started traveling with the Doctor, the Parapsychology Unit was shut down. You know, and like Zoe, Findle was a bit of a prodigy. Like, throughout the first 2 parts of this story, they're competing with each other, trying to figure out the right codes to open the doors. And again, it's a really cute dynamic, and it makes what happens at the end so much more gut-punching, so much more impactful. And the reason Zoe's old school, the Parapsychology Unit, was shut down was because that was where... I think I'm going to butcher the name, and if I do, please excuse me, and then correct me. The Brotherhood of Logicians was founded. The Brotherhood of Logicians was, of course, I'm just going to call it a cult. A cult of scientists who believed logic and reason should dictate society. And it was the Brotherhood of Logicians who were behind the events of Tomb of the Cybermen, because they wanted to awaken the Cybermen to take over humanity, because the Cybermen operate on emotionless logic. And this is where my biggest problem with this story comes in. Episode 2 is a massively blatant ripoff of Tomb of the Cybermen. You know, to Xenix and Findle being members of the Brotherhood of Logicians, trying to once again reawaken the Cybermen so they can take over Earth. And, you know, of course, trying to outsmart the Doctor, take companions hostage. Yeah, just episode 2 is just so blatant. Like, you know, Doctor Who has homaged and recycled plots in the past before, but it's never been as blatant as this, which I think is kind of why it bugs me so much. But then, thankfully, episodes 1, 3, and 4 are such different beasts that it does kind of help. You know, if the entire story had been a Tomb of the Cybermen ripoff, I would have been more mad, but it's just 1/4 of it. Anyway, what happens is Xenix realizes Zoe is a better fit to be a cyber controller, which, something I didn't know because I never watched The Wheel in Space. I really need to get on that. Maybe when I finish the Daemons. And anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Is that Zoe is partially cybernetic. Which, yeah, little interesting tidbit. Again, I had no realization. I did not know that. And, where do I want to go from there? And the Cybermen weren't defeated in the Cyber War. They were hiding in warp space, waiting for the cyber controller to call them back, which is what happens. Although there is something interesting here. The Cybermen have evolved. And I don't mean physically, I don't mean design change. Their logic has evolved, you know, like, because their goal was always continue the cyber race, survival. You know, find more humans, convert them into Cybermen, continue the cyber race, and survive. But after the Cyber War, their mindset has changed. realizing humans were such a threat to them, their goal became wipe them out. And, which I think this is the only time that's actually done it, because every other Cyberman story, it's always been conversion. But yeah, that's such an interesting plot line to see the Cybermen develop their logic to change and evolve. Actually, now that I think about it, I think that whole wipe out the human race thing might tie into Earthshock. I don't know. Anyway, Zoe and the Doctor are captured, and then they are taken through warp space back into the past to the height of the Cyber Wars, where the Cyber Controller is going to try and hook up Zoe to be a new Cyber Controller, basically. And this is where, I realized where Jamie doesn't have a major role in this story, because as the Doctor and Zoe are in the past with the Cybermen, Jamie is in the future with Captain Frank and Lanky, where he's having the entire story from the past retold to him. This is gonna start getting so confusing. So anyway, what happens is the Cyber Controller, or the Super Controller now, wants to have Zoe hooked up and become a new brain to try and win the Cyber Wars. And in the future, when Findle realizes what's going on, he hooks himself into the current Cyber Controller and then reaches into the past to try and take over. And really, this is where Wendy Padbury shines, and this really is what makes Zoe's plotline in this story so great, because when she realizes what Findle is doing, she is just utterly devastated. And it's a phenomenal performance. And anyway, Findle takes over the Cyber Controller and then orders all the Cybermen to kamikaze him. Effectively destroying the Cybermen and ending the Cyber War. And in the past, I should also note, the Doctor meets younger versions of Captain Frank and Lanky, which does some interesting things there. Like, the Doctor worries he may be changing the past. Like, Lanky was supposed to be partially converted, but because of the timing of his rescue, he was supposed to have his emotions intact. But in the future, Lanky tells Jamie that, the Doctor knew me as a Cyberman, so I had to wear this disguise. And I like that the story doesn't confirm it one way or the other. That, did this ever really happen, or did the Doctor change the past? And it does a lot of it with these little details, before everyone ends and wraps up and goes home. Overall, Last of the Cybermen is a lot of fun. There were some issues, like I mentioned, episode 2, but I feel that this story was so enjoyable, I was able to look past it, and I'm going to give Last of the Cybermen an 8 out of 10. So join me next week when we go back all the way to the first Doctor's era, where we'll meet new old friends and old foes, and finally learn what's going on when the fifth Doctor learns the secret history. And those were my thoughts on Last of the Cybermen. What were yours? Drop a comment below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share my video around as it helps my channel grow. In the description box below, you'll find the link to my Ko-fi where you can help support the channel, and you'll find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.